So my name's Alan Levin. I'm currently the chairman of the Internet Society of South Africa and the CEO of Vanilla, one of the ISPs, one of the 400 licensed ISPs in South Africa. And I'm here to tell you my story about the internet in South Africa. It goes back, I think, further than the internet, or beyond when the internet started, and really when computers, or even before computers, were used. I did a lot of research into how the internet was going to change our lives, our society, our economies, and specifically with a focus on South Africa. By 1994, there were already a few commercial networks. I managed to get a dial-up connection through the Internet Company of South Africa, ZACR, which went on to be Internet Africa as it is today, and had many different transformations between ZACR and Internet Africa, or UUNet, or MTN, various transformations. I would say up until 1998 was the initial internet era in South Africa. That was the point when SBC Communications bought Telkom or major Telkom shares from the South African government, and changed our entire telecommunications landscape for the following 10 years. Up until at least 2007, I consider that as a significant period because we had absolutely no idea when or if there would ever be competition in telecoms. And year by year, our usage and our competitiveness as far as access to the internet is concerned went down and down and down. Countries such as Egypt and Morocco, jumped ahead in their percentage of internet access, or people that could and will be using the internet, speeds of access, costs of access. They became far more competitive than us between the period of 1998 and 2007. I personally spent a great deal of time looking at African domain names, and 96% of African domain names were totally dysfunctional. And, a significant portion of them are still dysfunctional to this day, unfortunately. Although, fortunately, on the other side, the .za domain has always been a very competitive, globally functional domain name. I personally spent a great deal of time looking at African domain names, and 96% of African domain names were totally dysfunctional. And, a significant portion of them are still dysfunctional to this day, unfortunately. Although, fortunately, on the other side, the .za domain has always been a very competitive, globally functional domain name. So, whilst we had a very, functional domain name, it was really just the infrastructure, the telecoms access that held us back, not the actual resources, not the technical skills that we have in this country, not the access to technology, purely the anti-competitiveness of our policy, legislation in South Africa. What happened in 2007 is obviously a huge milestone where we learned that competition can be introduced not only through Parliament but through the civil courts. And it was through the civil courts that we won competition in telecoms, and we won not only some kind of view on competition, but with all 400 VANS licensees becoming licensed to provide full telecoms infrastructure, we immediately had full competition in telecoms. We were behind the rest of the world, but it only took us 5-6 years to catch up, which one could expect in 2007, in order to become globally competitive. Today, we can see that between 2007 and now, we have more than 30% of the population have come on board and started using the internet. At my son's school, I was chatting to him a couple of nights ago. He has a WhatsApp group with every single pupil in his class has to have access to WhatsApp. They don't allow teachers into their group. They don't allow parents into their group. but their ability to ask each other questions and share information is instantaneous. It's changed the way that school works. I'm not so sure that's quite filtered down into the workplace yet, but certainly within various social groups we're finding WhatsApp groups changing the way that communication works, both from the poorest of the poor up to the richest of the rich. I guess that, also with the advances in technology, something like this, which is an undersea cable with a number of fiber optic cables inside, a metal and plastic enclosure. I think this is really one of the main drivers of competition in the internet, because no longer are we using copper wires for access to the internet, rather we're using fiber optic cables, which have, as far as we're concerned, unlimited lifetime. The technologies are constantly evolving on the use of this physical infrastructure so that we can get more and more bandwidth carried across, at no additional cost of the physical infrastructure. Yes, we just change the equipment on each end of the infrastructure, so there are some elements of change. But the main cost of internet access is really digging up the pavements or stringing cables, between cities into our homes and things like that. We're seeing much bigger numbers of people starting to use the internet in South Africa because it's become a qualifier to communicate. From 90 cents for a text message to free for a photograph. You know what I mean? Thanks to the internet. Over 2-3 years, I think we've built an understanding amongst all of us that we certainly didn't want to enable or allow the technology to fall over. And I think that's what largely ensured that the ZA domain name stayed functional and one of the best, in fact the best domain in Africa by 900%, much more subscribed domain than any other African country. We got to thank three guys from, at least the three core people who started this year's ZA domain and Uniforum, Calvin Brown, Theo Kramer, and Mark Elkins. All three of them are still deeply involved in internet governance and the governance of .za, as well as various other African domain names.